Next up we have Todd again, and he's going to talk to us now about Beyond Animal Control, daily community education. Will you welcome Todd Stosuy, please?
Hello. So it's a second day in the afternoon. Is everybody awake? Everybody's awake? All right. All right, good. Everybody's had their tea. We're good to go. All right, so yesterday I really talked a lot about the proactive community education that we in Santa Cruz County Animal Shelter perform, and kind of what we're hoping to model across a lot of places in the country for both the officers and for volunteers to do. This particular presentation is more designed specifically for officers and shelters that employ officers, and how we can kind of change what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And I know there's a number of policymakers here, and I think that it's something good for them as well to look at, because it might cut out some of your funding at the beginning, but in the long run, it's actually going to save you money. And we'll talk about that. So I talk about my background. I know yesterday they went over my background, but I kind of like to throw that into this particular slide, into this particular presentation, just so you know why I'm talking about what I'm talking about and where I've got to where I've gotten, and why I think it's so important to get it out there. And I will caveat, I guess yesterday I made the comment that I might curse a bit, so I apologize for it. And I had a number of Aussies come up to me yesterday and say, curse all you fucking want. Because we all curse, so curse all you want. So I'll be cursing quite a bit here. So I was an emergency medical technician for about 10 years. I actually became an EMT, and that's someone who basically sits in an ambulance and provides emergency medical care in emergencies. I actually became an EMT at the age of 16 back in New Jersey, and was actually the youngest EMT at the time in the state. I did that for about 10 years on a volunteer basis, as well as on a paid basis. When I was in college, I worked for an urban rescue squad, predominantly an African-American community, and it was kind of my first delving into a very underprivileged society that I my eyes had not been open to before. So I went into a community that was very poor, very poverty-stricken, and there was a lot of drugs. So it was kind of my first eye-opening into what it was like to work in an underprivileged community. And that was during my college time, where I did go in and get 2 degrees, both in administration of justice and sociology with a minor in criminology, with the intention of becoming a police officer. And as I mentioned yesterday, once I started doing my internships with the police departments and I started seeing what actually happened in police work, it was very different from what I'd been taught in school. You know, being in school, it was all about community policing, it was about working with the community, not about what was happening and what I saw. And so after 4 years in college and doing all this studying, I kind of realized, wait, I got to do something completely different, because this is not what I want to do. And I made the wonderful step of becoming a first grade teacher. And I worked in inner city Philadelphia. If anyone's familiar with Philadelphia, inner city Philadelphia is a very rough neighborhood. And it was the first time my eyes were open to how not only can the place where you're born keep you down in society, but also the bureaucracy and the government that's supposed to be there to support you. I was very gung-ho. I was about 21, 22 years old, really trying to go in there, trying to make a difference. And the bureaucracy of the school, the bureaucracy of the policies wouldn't allow me to help my students. And it was very frustrating, very hard, but it really opened my eyes to what the government can do to actually positively affect the community if they can. And so after that, and this is often where people kind of go, oh my God, this guy's some crazy PETA guy. I did work at PETA for 2 years, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I was a cruelty caseworker there. I worked with police officers, prosecutors all across the United States, helping them prosecute animal cruelty crimes. So places like Mississippi, Alabama, where they don't have strong animal control agencies, they would ask for our help, and we'd come in and we'd help prosecute those crimes for them to make sure that the charges stuck on those offenders. Now, the problem with PETA is when I say the word PETA, people cringe because of what they think about PETA, and that was one of the reasons why I had to stop working there, was just because I didn't agree with a lot of the politics that were going on, a lot of the things that they did. So luckily, I found a job as an animal control officer out in Santa Cruz, and I do need to update this slide. I've actually been there for 12 years now. I just hit my 12-year mark in August. And I've been there for 12 years, and it's a wonderful, wonderful position where you get to go in, work with the community, work as a law enforcement officer, but also be a social worker. Also get to be someone who's on the front lines every day, working with the community, and you can make positive, long-term, effective change. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this particular presentation. And then just to throw it out there, I have been the National Animal Care and Control Association president for the past 4.5 years, and I've been on the board since 2008. So I've done a lot of traveling around the country of the United States, working with different agencies across the country. And agencies across the country, while they don't necessarily have this model that I'm going to be talking about, are very open to it and want to start moving towards this. I also consult with Pets for Life, Humane Society of the Pets for Life team, and they've had me go around to a couple communities and start getting that implemented. So, so here we go. Here's where the cursing starts. So open door, open heart, serving Santa Cruz County's neediest animals. That's where I work now. That's our tagline. We put it out there to let people know that our doors are always open. We'll take in any animal that needs to come in, but at the same time, we truly only want to help the neediest animals. We don't want to take in everything. We just want to take in those neediest animals that truly need us. We are an open door admission shelter. We intake currently about 6,500 animals, and I need to change that. I actually created these presentations. I started doing these things about 4 or 5 years ago, and our numbers used to be about 85, 9,500, and every year they just keep creeping down. And that's due to a number of programs that we have, one being with the way the field services department works, but also kind of our aggressive spay-neuter campaigns, which I'll be talking about tomorrow, as well as a lot of other outreach events and things that we do. So that number just keeps dropping every year to the number of animals that we actually intake into our shelter. And as we all know, less intake equals less euthanasia. Here's the department I'm in charge of. We respond to about 11,000 calls a year for service, provide 24-hour emergency response, but the thing I'm going to talk about today is this proactive community service stuff that we do while we're doing our calls. And this all kind of stems from the proactive community animal control stuff that I talked about yesterday. The way we handle calls now kind of stemmed from that program that we started. So as an NACA president, as I travel around the country and I talk to a lot of officers, and I've talked to hundreds of officers at this time, there's always certain ideas that continuously pop up over and over and over again. And whether I'm in Mississippi, whether I'm in California, whether I'm in Oregon, I hear the same things over and over again. And one of those big ones is, I have so many calls to do, I can't spend time helping people. I just need to issue a citation or notice to comply and run to the next call. And that's where I say bullshit. That's where I say, if that's what you're doing, if you have so many calls that you can't spend an extra 5 or 10 minutes to talk to somebody to try and resolve that problem that's happening there, then you're not doing your job. If you're just worrying about the number of calls you're responding to and not worrying about actually resolving what that situation is, then you've not done your job. So, my officers, if they come in and they have 40 calls in a day, even if they only do 10 calls, if those 10 calls don't require us to go back, that's a success that day. It's not about how many calls you do, it's about solving those calls. I also say bullshit to this next one. If an animal has food, water, and shelter, there isn't anything else I can do to help it. Legally, yes, that might be correct. But, as I said yesterday in my talk, if I stick you in a backyard with a little house, a steak, or for me, I'm a vegan, so I'd have a little tofu steak, and a glass of water or a glass of wine, you're going to be bored out of your fucking mind. You're going to be sitting back there going, what do I do now? What do I do now? I'm just sitting here, I got my iPad. I'll pull my iPad out, I'll pull out my little iPhone, and you'll start working on it. That's what an animal in the backyard needs too. An animal that's provided food, water, and shelter is bored out of its mind if it doesn't have some sort of enrichment. And that's where we as officers, when we're out there in the streets working with people, can really provide that extra 5 or 10 minutes of talking with people, solving those nuisance barking dog complaints. I heard the first day that I was here, I heard the number one call for service that happens here is barking dog complaints. Same thing in the United States. And you know what? The way to resolve that is by working on enrichment, by talking with people about why the dog's bark in the first place. Dogs are bored. That's oftentimes why they bark. And so you can solve a lot of problems by enriching that animal's life, taking that minor mental neglect thing and turning it into something better. I hate people. It's the animals that I like. How many people here say that, right? It's true. It happens from time to time. But overall, if you truly hate people and you like animals, you're in the wrong business. Because our job as officers and our jobs in animal sheltering really is 95% of the time people. It's really only 5% of the animals. If you really just want to work with animals, then you can work inside the shelter in the kennels, but any other job, you're really dealing with people. And it's important, even if you hate them, even if you want to walk away and scream and kill somebody, that when you're talking to them, you're treating them with respect and compassion so that you can get what you want out of them. And that's kind of what I always say is, when you're working with someone, even if they completely disagree with you and they're screaming, they're yelling at you, and you can convince them to do what you want, make them think they're doing what they want, make them think what they're doing what they want, but it's actually what I want, that's a success. And then finally, the big one I always hear is people who cannot afford a pet shouldn't have a pet. And that's another one of those that's just completely a fallacy. Some of the best animal owners out there are people who, as I mentioned yesterday in Santa Cruz, our huge homeless population, those folks are some of the best animal owners I've ever seen. They will feed their animal before they take care of themselves. So that myth about those who can't afford a pet shouldn't have a pet, how many people who can't afford a child have a child, right? And they somehow make it out okay, most of them. So it's the same thing with pets. So here's where I get very passionate about this and very passionate about officers. And I'm going to look at you officers back there over and over again, because this is where we're all going to start looking at you. Because we as officers, I mean, it's one of the most unique positions we can have in the animal sheltering world, in the animal welfare field, is that we actually can go out there and change something in a community. We can effectively make long-term change. It's not just about helping that one dog. By helping that one dog, working with people positively, making this community engagement, we can influence an entire community to care for their animals differently. Just one officer can do it. And it really can work. And one of the things I always bring up is when I first started working in Santa Cruz, there's a very large Mexican immigrant population there. And where I came in from in New Jersey, we didn't really have a very large Latino population at all. And when I first went out there, dogs and cats started coming in on a routine basis with oil on their backs. And I started thinking, what is going on with this oil on their backs? Is there some crazy guy in the middle of the night just running around sprinkling oil on people, like on these animals? What is happening here? Come to find out, in Latino cultures, it's been passed down generation to generation that if your animal has fleas or mange, that you put used motor oil on their backs to help cure that. So that's one of those things where this is a particular thing that's being passed down from culture to culture, which is not being done to harm the animal. It's being done because it's being passed down, but it's not in the best interest of the animals. So we can come in as animal control officers and actively engage that community and say, look, this is putting flea medications on the animals much better as opposed to doing this. And over time, as we continuously work within the community, work within the culture, and respect the culture, we can actually change that behavior. And in Santa Cruz County right now, I've not seen an oil dog or an oil cat in probably about 5 or 6 years now, because we went out there and we really worked with the community on changing that thing out there. So things to keep in mind as an officer, and I know the policymakers here are going to hate this: citations and impounds are not a measure of success. If your budget is dependent on infringement fees, figure out a new way to create a budget, because you are going to hurt yourself in the long run by depending on infringement fines to balance your budget. Because citations and impounds, and I'm going to talk about why they're not a measure of success, they're going to hurt you in the long run. Notices to comply are not a measure of success, especially if the animal ends up being surrendered to the shelter. So you go out on a call as an officer and you say, you know what, your dog needs a doghouse. I'm going to give you notice to comply. You have 7 days to get a doghouse, and I'll be back. That dog is now sitting there for 7 days going, dude, I want a fucking doghouse right now. I don't want a doghouse in 7 days. I want a doghouse now. It's raining, it's cold, I want a doghouse. So you give them 7 days to get the doghouse, and the dog's sitting out there freezing. At the same time, the owner then goes, you know what? I can't afford a doghouse. I love my dog, but I'm really broke. I don't have a job. I'm just going to bring the dog into the shelter and surrender it. That gets rid of that humane notice. So just issuing notice to comply and hoping that the best is going to happen is not a measure of success. Because the coolest thing about us as animal control officers, I'm going to make eye contact with each one of you guys back there, we are on the front lines daily in our communities. Every single day, all across Australia, all across the United States, all across the Netherlands, everywhere you go, front lines of our communities. HSUS has their $1 million budget, ASPCA has their $1 million budgets, but they can really only affect certain communities at a time. They can't go into every single community at once and help animals, whereas we as officers, this is what we do every day. It's pretty freaking cool, I think. And other things to keep in mind is that we don't need to use enforcement action to have people live healthy lives with, I stumbled on that one. We can help people and their animals live happy without enforcement. We don't need to enforce laws. We don't need to issue infringement fines. We don't need to arrest people to make them live happy, healthier lives with their animals. The majority of people out there, I would say 95% of the population, cares and loves for their animals. They might just have issues in their lives where they can't maybe necessarily afford the resources to put flea medication on, afford a doghouse, that sort of thing. They're not doing it intentionally to abuse that animal. They just can't necessarily afford it. And we as government agencies, we as officers can come in and help that to reduce that shelter intake, to reduce that euthanasia. As I said, the majority of people love their animals and they really do want to do what's right with them. Those of us who sat through Betsy's presentation yesterday on Pets for Life, it's what it's all about. People do love their animals and they do want to do what's right for them. So the real measures of success and the real ways you can determine why, when you're going out there every day, putting on your uniform and working, this is how you truly can measure your success. Less shelter intake. The less animals coming into the shelter, the better. Now, I say that doesn't mean you should just drive down the street, see a hoarding house of 80 cats and just be like, you know what? I'm not going to bring those 80 cats in because that's 80 cats I'm euthanizing. Let's just pretend we don't see that. No. What I'm talking about is animals that are in happy, non-neglectful homes. Homes where the animals are cared for, they're loved, they're part of the family, they just might not have some of the resources that we, folks of us who have money, take for granted. You know, routine vaccinations, spay-neuter services, not having a doghouse, those sort of things. Another measure of success, lower euthanasia numbers. Now, I will caveat that again, if due to animals being kept in happy homes. The whole point of animal sheltering is to help animals. And euthanasia, while we all dislike it, sometimes at this point still needs to happen. It is what it is. You guys are very lucky where you are, not having to do it with overcrowded populations, but it still happens in a lot of places. And I particularly take that 80 cats in a hoarding house right now. Those 80 cats might be better off euthanized than they are living in that hoarding house. So if those animals have to come into the shelter and they have to be euthanized due to sickness, due to behavior problems, due to whatever, that's what we're there for. Those are the neediest animals in our community that we need to help. The animals we don't need to take in are those animals that aren't being neglected out there, those animals that aren't suffering out there. And I will be the first to admit, when I first started working in animal control, I just took everything. I just went around the street saying, I'm going to grab this dog, I'm going to grab this cat, oh, you're a bad dog owner, I'm going to take it from you. And through the years as I've worked this, I've realized how that's not an effective thing. It increases animals in the shelter, and on the other side, the people whose animal you just took from them, just get another dog, just get another cat, and they treat it the exact same way. So it's more about the education. The real measure of success, which can't be quantified in data, is helping your community. By going out there, and when you drive down the street, people waving at you, people coming up to you and saying, hey, Todd, how's it going today? You know, my neighbor, he's got these dogs in the backyard, these puppies, and I was thinking maybe you should check on them. You know, having people in your community respect, trust, and want you to help them. And that's a big thing, especially in the United States right now. When you put on a badge, having a badge in the United States right now is a scary thing, especially in minority communities. Right now, there's a big rift between law enforcement and minority communities, and for good reason. There's been some awful things that some awful cops have done. And so by us having a uniform and going into communities, we need to make sure we have the trust in underprivileged minority communities so that we can make this effective change and people want to talk to us. So here's where I go with animal control, and this is in the States. I apologize I didn't have Australia's animal control stuff, but we were dog catchers. That's what we were. That's what we were hired as. We were out there to catch dogs. You know, there was a lot of dogs running loose. There was a lot of rabies going on, and so the position of dog catcher was founded. Dog catchers went out. Dog catchers caught dogs. Dog catchers vaccinated dogs. And that was basically the role of the dog catcher. The problem is, when we hear that word dog catcher, we think of all those Disney cartoons. We think of 101 Dalmatians where the useless animal control officer stumbles around and falls on himself and has a net and can't catch the dog. And so we as animal control officers say, we're not dog catchers. We're animal control officers. We're legit. We are true law enforcement officers. We are not dog catchers. But you know what? We are dog catchers, aren't we? We do catch dogs, and so we are. But it's all semantics. And so officers now, you know, we have these fancy trucks, we have these beautiful uniforms, we have a budget, we have all this stuff, and so we've gotten to this point, and one of the things that I argue, and what I think actually happened, is in 2001, the show Animal Cops came out in the United States. So in 2001, the show Animal Cops comes out, people start watching it, and they see New York City Police Department with their guns, and they're going out there, and they're arresting bad guys and doing that. And all of us animal control officers all across the United States are going, we want to be like that. That's pretty cool. We want that. We don't want to just be these bumbling idiots with a net. And then at the same time, 9/11 happened. You know, the attack on the Twin Towers happened. So those things kind of coincided with each other. And so as soon as that happened, people went from the community policing model of the 90s to let's just arm ourselves. Let's drive these big fancy trucks. Let's have guns. Let's really protect ourselves because it's a dangerous world out there and everyone's a terrorist. And so I think that's kind of as that happened, animal control kind of jumped along board with the cops, and we all started getting tasers and this and that, and we all started kind of moving forward in this direction of being more militaristic. And with that came a lot more enforcement action, came a lot more arrests, came a lot more seizing of animals, because we were moving in that direction of being more militaristic as opposed to being community-oriented. Roll ahead to now, where we are today, where all this crazy stuff is happening with cops in our communities, where Barack Obama is now on NPR, National Public Radio, saying we need to have more community policing out there. You know, so it's starting to come back, and I think that's going to be the next step. You know, and as I do this speech and I talk to animal control officers, they say, you know what? I don't want to stop being law enforcement. I don't want to stop, arresting bad guys. I don't want to stop doing that stuff because we've gone from just being these idiots with nets to being trusted in our communities. People know what animal control is now. People know who we are. And so we don't want to give that up. But my argument is that we're not actually giving anything up. We have now risen to the point where we're respected members of the community. People know what we do, and it's now time for our profession to expand and grow to the next level. And by expanding and grow to the next level means to stop being so law enforcement. Means that 95% of the people that we come in contact don't need to get a ticket. 95% of the people that we come in contact with don't need to be arrested. Yes, that 5% of the people who kick their dog, that 5% of the people who starve their animal to death, that 5% of people who sleep with their cat, and sleep with their cat, I mean something else than you think of, but I've had that case, and yes, I put that person in jail. So those people need to go to jail, but that's only about 5% of the population. Because the cool thing is we really speak for those without a voice. We go out there, and as I said, we go to that dog, we go to that backyard where that dog doesn't have the dog house, and we say, hey, you got 7 days to get a dog house. That dog is sitting there looking at you going, dude, you're being paid by the government to help me, and you're going to make me sit in the rain for 7 more days. So that's what I'm talking about. They want us to help them. That dog out there right then and there says, I want a dog house right now. Can you get me a dog house? And as I spoke yesterday with my proactive community animal control stuff, having my little granny squad on my super speed dial, that's how we can make that effective change. I'm out there, I see the dog at the doghouse, I call them up, and boom, they got a doghouse. Those animals don't want us just to issue that notice and walk away. They want help right then and there. At the same time, wouldn't they rather stay in those homes that love them instead of being brought to the shelter? Those animals that truly are in loving, caring homes, wouldn't they rather stay in that house than suddenly be put in the shelter going, my God, what just happened? Well, where am I? I just had a family who loved me, and now here I am. And on a side note, one of my recent Chihuahua adoption, and I heard you guys need Chihuahuas out here. Did I hear that? If we can somehow figure out how to get a plane, I will send you 1,000 Chihuahuas, because that's all I have. Okay, that's all I have is Chihuahuas in my shelter. My little Chihuahua that I have now, she was a street dog for about 2 years, but she was kind of a community dog, and I really tried to work with the community to take care of her and try to treat her properly. Unfortunately, she ended up being impounded at the shelter, but she was the same thing. She was happy and loved in the community. She ended up at the shelter. It was one of my failed experiments, and we all need to admit that sometimes we do fail. One of my failed experiments, she did end up in the shelter where she was sitting in the back of the cage, just completely freaked out of her mind. We ended up adopting her. We ended up saying, you know what, she's in this cage, let's foster her, try and find her a new home. And as soon as she came in the house, of course, we fell in love with her. Who knew that I would love a Chihuahua, but I do, so you can too. So with citations make our life easier. Let's admit it. I go out to someone's house, their dog isn't spayed and neutered. We have a spay and neuter ordinance in Santa Cruz County. I just issue them a ticket and I walk away. I say, okay, here's a $350 ticket. You got to get your dog spayed or neutered. Have a nice day. But it doesn't fix that problem. There's a lot of people in our communities who you give them that ticket and they're going to say, you know what? I already have a warrant out for drugs. Why do I care if I get a warrant for a dog license or a warrant for not having my dog spayed or neutered? And they're going to throw it away. Or if it's an infringement fee, which is basically a monetary fine, they're going to say, you know what? My credit's shot anyway. I'm never going to buy a house. What do I care if I have to pay this $200 infringement fee? And they're going to throw it away. And so you have not fixed the root of that problem. You have not actually got that animal spayed and neutered. You've not gotten that animal license. You've not gotten that animal doghouse. Whatever it is you're citing for, you've not corrected the problem. You've cited, you walked away. The biggest problem with citations, they create a huge mistrust of the shelter and therefore less utilization of our services. I'm out there just hitting people's citations all day. They're not going to want to come into the shelter and use our rabies vaccination clinic, use our low-cost spay-neuter services, find out information on their barking dog, that sort of thing. So we're creating this mistrust of us by just handing citations out. And as I mentioned, some people just ignore those citations and don't care. Impounding animals. We go out there like I used to do and impound every animal running around. We now have to either adopt them or euthanize them. We now suddenly have these animals. The owner of that dog who you didn't get the doghouse for is going to get a new pet and treat it the exact same way because you didn't fix the root of the problem. You didn't go to that owner and say, here's XYZ why it's important to have a doghouse for your dog. And that's something we take for granted. Yes, it's obvious. A dog needs a doghouse if it's a backyard dog so it is protected from the elements. But not everybody thinks that way. I can't count the number of times I've given a simple collar and a leash to people who'd never thought about it in their lives to walk their dog. They just think an animal sits in the backyard, and when you talk to them and you give them those resources, it suddenly opens up this new idea in their mind going, wow, I can walk a dog on a leash? Yes, you can walk a dog on a leash, but we need to kind of remember that there's a lot of people in society that don't care for animals the way we think about animals. Every single day of my life, that's all I think about. I have animals tattooed all over me. I go to work and deal with animals. On my time off, come to conferences in Australia and talk about animals. But not everybody does that. And we need to remember that when we're out there being all high and mighty about, oh my God, I can't believe that dog has flea dermatitis. That's absolutely fucking horrible. No, maybe that person just didn't realize they could put flea medication on their dog. Take a step back. Let's get off our podiums and realize not everybody thinks about animals the way we do. Oh, and it also, that last one, the impounding animals does create more mistrust of the shelter. And notice to comply, I think I've beaten this one in a bit, is, depending on the length of time, the animal's immediate needs are not being met. You give someone 7 days to take a dog to a vet for some reason, that's 7 days, that animal's not getting vet care. So depending on the length of time, it's not immediately being helped. It creates an unnecessary follow-up. You give someone 7 days to go get their dog in the vet or get a dog house, you then have to go back out there and make sure they've done it. If they're not home, you leave a notice, you go back out the next day. They're not home, you leave a notice. And when I was in Los Angeles about 6 months ago talking to the officers there, they said the big problem they have is they'll give someone a 7-day notice to comply or something similar, and then the people realize they never have to open the door again. That's the thing. If a cop or animal control ever comes to your door and knocks, just don't open the door. They can't come in, and that's what a lot of people don't realize. So that first time when they open the door and then we tell them they have to do something, they wise up, and the next time they just don't open the door. Because the only way you're going to get into that house is with a warrant, and you're not going to get into a house with a warrant just for a dog house or just for not having, depending on what the vet cares, you probably wouldn't. So it's that unnecessary follow-up and that immediate thing not being met. And it also creates that additional workload of just constantly going out and going out and going out. But more importantly, it really does not solve the root of the problem. You wear a uniform and you have a badge, and so people do what you tell them because you told them. How many times, have you... No, I guess I won't bring that story up, but we'll be PC here. Yeah, let's not bring that one up. So, but it really doesn't solve. The animal control officer or law enforcement officer comes to your house and says, "You need to do this." You do it. You're like, "Oh shit, they got a badge. I better do what they're telling me." But they might not understand why they're doing it. So here's where I get into some common situations. These are things that I see on a daily basis in the streets. I work in the streets every single day. These are situations that are not illegal. These are calls that I was called on, basic neglect complaints, where people said, hey, this dog is being neglected, need you to come out, need you to check on it, need you to take it, need you to issue citations, need you to arrest people, blah, blah, blah. So we went out there and did an investigation. In all these cases, I could have, as an officer, walked up and looked and said, food, water, shelter. Okay, I can walk away now. Nothing illegal is happening here. On to the next call. But instead of doing that, we take that extra 5 or 10 minutes to talk to the owner to make this huge impact for the quality of life for the animals. Because at this point in time, mental neglect really isn't a crime. But most of our barking dog complaints are based on mental neglect. And so that's something we need to think about when we're out there doing this stuff. Because, as I've said before, there's more to life than just food, water, and shelter. There's way more to life than just food, water, and shelter. You try it. For a week, just have food, water, and shelter for a week and see how far you get. So this little dog, this dog lived in the front yard, and somebody called in and said, there's a chained up dog in this yard. Dog has no dog house, has no water. You need to get out there and you need to take this animal away from this family. They don't deserve to have this animal. So I get out there, and we wear full uniforms. And I get out there, and as soon as I get out, and it's something else, and Aussie told me the other day, we call gang members in our society gang bangers. Apparently gang banger is something very different here. Something new I've learned. So, the gangbanger, when I approached this particular house, came up to me, and he had tattoos all over his face. He was one of those, and I'm not against tattoos, obviously, but tattoos all over his face, over his head, and he comes up and he's like, what the fuck you want? What the fuck's going on? What you want? And I said, hey, I got this complaint about your dog. We want to check on your dog, And he goes, oh, he's like, my dog? Oh, shit. I forget the dog's name at this point. Let's just call her Fluffy because she looks fluffy. Dude, let me show you Fluffy. She is the greatest little dog. He runs in the yard, picks her up. He's all kissing her. He's like, see her? Isn't she great? I was like, yeah, she is great. She looks lovely. She's wonderful. And I'm looking at what he has here, and none of this is illegal. In California, it's illegal to chain dogs up, but it's not illegal to put them on a trolley system. So that trolley that the dog's on is not illegal. In my mind, a trolley is the exact same thing as a chain. It really is. I see the difference in the amount of room they have, but for all intents and purposes, it's the same dang thing. So I don't really like trolleys, even unless that's all I can get. The water bowl has fresh potable water. For a dog living outside, that is some of the cleanest water I've ever seen, especially with a plastic bowl. That's a plastic bowl with clean, fresh water because this person's given water every single day. Doghouse, That looks atrocious. That looks like the worst doghouse I've ever seen in my life, but you know what? It works. It works. It's a dog. It's got a cover in case it rains. Dog goes in there, dog's safe. There's nothing wrong with that. So all of that is completely legal, completely wonderful. Now, the thing is, as I said, having a dog on a runner's, in my mind, not the best for the dog. So let's figure out why this dog's not loose in the front yard. The reason why this dog's not loose in the front yard is because that fence you see in the back had a couple broken boards in it. So this owner, who knew about runners because we have such a positive influence in our community, his friend said to him, dude, you can't tether your dog up. Animal control doesn't like you to tether your dog. You got to put this runner thing up. So he went on his own accord and bought this runner so that he'd be legal, so he'd be compliant. So he puts this thing up so the dog doesn't escape the yard. And when I did this talk in Raleigh, Durham, one of the officers said, well, couldn't you have just pushed the doghouse up against the hole in the fence? Yes, yes, he could have. That would have solved the problem. What I did is I called it my grannies. And I said, grannies, I need you out here. I need you to put the siren on the car and get out here quick. We got this dog we got to rescue. So they come out, and they fixed the fence. They brought a couple boards with them. They hammered the fence together, and boom, now the dog's loose in that front yard. Right? Simple fix. Yes, we could have just pushed the doghouse up against that thing as well. So now the dog's off that chain. I ended up giving the guy a stainless water ball. I was like, look, I know this is great. It's clean water, but unfortunately plastic is prone to get a lot of algae and stuff in it. So just use this stainless steel water ball. It's cleaner, blah, blah, blah. And then we did provide him with a free doghouse as well that the grannies built. And the only really reason we did that is because this is a front yard and people fucking suck. People would have just called all day long about and made neglect calls on this dog. And so we just gave him a nice, pretty doghouse so people couldn't do that. So, and all that took maybe an extra 10 minutes of my time to talk to this guy. Maybe took 20 minutes, 30 minutes for the granny squad to come out. But that kind of, extra bit of time helps solve that in the long run, as opposed to going out and just taking that animal or just leaving it there saying, everything's legal. This particular call, this was one of those ones, and I'm a big person that says, we should never judge anybody. We should keep all our biases aside. I went into this particular house thinking that I was going to be seizing this animal, thinking that this person was a scumbag, not realizing what I was about to find. So that's, where I had to kind of take a step back and realize that I was kind of being biased when I walked in there on this particular call. But we get a call for a dog or some sort of animal in a box crying that sounded in distress. So I get there, knock on the door. Hey, I'm Officer Stosuy with the Animal Shelter. We got this complaint about a dog in your yard. Do you mind if we check? I'm like, oh yeah, our dog. Come on back and check out our dog. So we go in the backyard and I see this little box thing going on here. You can see that thing right there. So so I'm looking at it and I hear this dog yiping in it and I'm like, ooh, I'm about to make an arrest. Something bad's about to happen here. This person's a scumbag. And they're like, all right, come here, let me show you. They take the tarp off. They open it up, and I'm like just kind of taking pictures as they're doing it. And then I look inside the dog, in this little thing, and there's a really loved, happy, wonderful Chihuahua just chilling out in there. And the people reach in, they pick the dog up. They're like, look, it's our dog. We love him. Look, he's so cute. Or she, so cute. They put her down. She's running around all excited, doing spinnies with him and everything. And I looked at him, and I said, what in the world are you doing with this dog in a box? What is happening here? And they said, oh, well, let me tell you. We don't want her to get pregnant, and our fence is all broken, and so if we leave her back here, normally she's an indoor dog, but we like her to be outside sometimes, if we have people coming over, this and that, but if we leave her in the backyard, she's going to get out, she's going to get pregnant. So we devised this thing where we put her inside this box, and then she started chewing through the box. So we wrapped it with chicken wire. Then she couldn't chew out of the box, but we were so concerned about her being in this box and so concerned about her being afraid inside this box that we decided to take our shirts off and give it to her. So the dog's in there sleeping on their shirts that they've been wearing, and I wish I'd gotten a better picture of it, but that's the shirt that they've been wearing that they put in there so that the dog wouldn't be afraid. So this is a truly loved animal. So I'm looking at them going, you know what? If the whole problem is your dog isn't spayed, I'm just going to give you a free spay. Let me just get your damn dog spayed, and let's have the granny squad come out, drive your dog to the vet if you need it. We'll get her spayed, and then she can be out of this box. Well, we got to fix the fence too. Why don't we just take off that chicken wire, wrap the chicken wire around the fence, as opposed to putting it around the box. And so that's what we did. We spent some time putting up the chicken wire, doing all that. And you look at this, and this was a dog that was truly, 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 truly loved by this family, doing what they could with the resources they had. This was a very poor family. This was a family where about 10 families lived in the same house. It was just very poor. But they had a box, they had some chicken wire, and they had a tarp to try and protect this dog so that she wouldn't get out and get pregnant. So this family, while they're doing something that looks crazy, is doing with what limited resources they have. And I think that's wonderful for that animal to be in such a great family. That dog does not need to come into the shelter. That is not a needy animal that needs to come into my shelter. Another dog in a box. Apparently, we have a lot of dogs in boxes in Santa Cruz. This particular one was another one, dog, and I think these were actually kind of similar to each other, 4-1, 7-1. So these are actually exactly 3 months apart, these two calls. This particular one, another dog crying in a box, and the woman brings me in the backyard, and it was a giant, big, one of those big wiggle butt pit bulls, just like jumps out, she's wiggling, all excited and all happy and loving, and they're like, look, we put her in this thing, and if you look inside the doghouse, there's beds and blankets and all this stuff, and this was a really odd day, April 1st, 2014, it was drizzling in California, which it is not, well, apparently it's raining today in California, but we have a 4-year drought going on right now, but for some reason it was drizzling that day, so they concocted this thing so that this dog wouldn't get wet. In one day, with a little bit of drizzle, they put this together so this dog wouldn't get wet. Now, the problem with what they had done was the way this thing is every time the dog would jump out, she'd bang, because she's a wiggle butt, she'd bang her tail on the top of it. So every time she banged it, it would get cut a little bit more. So she kind of had some cuts on her tail. So we went and we got a little saw. I said, look, this isn't the best interest of your animal. You guys got a saw or something in here? And we just sawed a bigger hole. We just kind of sawed it like a door so the dog could go in and out. And then the dog had some minor injuries on the tail. And I know in animal control for years, I'd be like, you know what? You need to go to a veterinarian. You need to see a veterinarian within 7 days for those cuts on that tail. But how many of us go to a doctor when we have a cut on our finger? Right? There's no need for this dog to go see a veterinarian. Put some damn Neosporin on the dog's tail, and if it gets infected, go to a veterinarian. So that's what we did. Rather than issue that vet care agreement, gave her the benefit of the doubt, said, look, you love this dog, you care for this dog, put some Neosporin on it, call me if there's a problem. That sort of thing. Gaining that trust. This dog, this is one of my favorite dogs I've ever met, this little one. This was another neglect complaint, this backyard poodle. And do you have backyard poodles here in Australia? No backyard poodles? I have a million backyard poodles, so I will send you chihuahuas and poodles. You and poodles. But backyard poodles, when they're out there, poodles need to be groomed, because if poodles aren't groomed, they get severely matted. The severe matting actually can really harm the animal. They can be painful. Flies can actually lay maggots in them. So they're very painful. They need to be groomed. A lot of people don't realize that. And so this dog, I knock on the door, they bring me in the backyard, and it's this little boy, it's a mother Spanish-speaking only, this little 7-year-old boy, and he's like, check out my dog, I love my dog. And as soon as we get out there, this dog did the zoomies around the yard. Dog's zooming, running around the yard, kids picking the dog up, they're kissing him. It was like a Hallmark commercial. I'm sitting there, I'm like, wow, this is really kind of cool. And so I'm talking to the mother, and I'm like, look, or talking to the kid, since I'm not bilingual, as I admitted yesterday, saying, look, the dog does need to be groomed. This is a wonderful dog, but you do need to groom the dog. And she said, you know what? I can't afford the grooming. My husband just lost his job. I've been out of work for a couple of years. You're just going to have to take the dog because I can't afford to go to the groomer. And, I'm looking at her going, wait a minute. Your son is 7 years old. Your dog is 7 years old. Did you get them at the same time? She's like, oh, yeah, we adopted the dog and had our child at the exact same time. So that basically this kid's grown up with this dog. So I'm looking at him going, so you want me to take that dog away from this family? That's not what I'm going to do. I'm not taking this dog away from this family. And I know, and this is where I kind of throw out the word rescue, and I apologize for those of you who use the word rescue, but I really hate that word rescue these days. I think it's been beaten to a pulp. Because back in the day when I first started, I would have taken this dog out, and I would have been like, I rescued this dog. Woo, look, I rescued it. But you know what? I didn't rescue that dog. I tore apart a family. That's what I would have done in that particular situation. Not rescued that animal, tore apart a family with a loving dog, a kid who loved him. So we ended up having the granny squad come out, grab the dog, bring the dog in, and you see how important the granny squad is. I mean, they will help you out all the time. They come out, they get the dog, they bring the dog in, get her groomed. 5 minutes? Thank you. Bring the dog in. That was like yesterday when I went, poop. Right? Because poop is still funny, right? Even though I haven't talked about it today, it's still funny. So we get that dog spayed at the same time she's in our care. We do it for free, get her groomed, get her back in that house. There's no reason to have that animal in our care. And one of the cool things is at HSUS Expo last year, I actually won like a $300 grooming kit by putting my business card in one of the things. So we now have this like $300 grooming kit that one of my officers has with her, and so she's the new granny squad for grooming. So if I have an animal needs grooming, I just go G27, G25, I need you to respond to blah, 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 grooming care. And then she goes out there and she does it, so pretty cool. So with our day-to-day work and doing some of those calls, and those were all calls for service. Yesterday I talked a lot about animals I came across when I knocked on the door. These were calls for service that we responded to that we handled in a much different way than the majority of animal control agencies out there, and had much more positive outcomes with them than just issuing a notice to comply, taking the animal in, issuing a citation, really working with the community to resolve those problems right then and there for the sake of the animals and the family. So in our vehicles, we have one compartment in every single ACO truck that just has free stuff in it. Stuff that we get donated from Amazon wish list, stuff we get from media campaigns, stuff we've gotten from grants in the past, and stuff we buy with all the extra money we have from the wonderful spay-neuter program I'm going to talk to you about tomorrow. We buy all these things so we can give them out to the community. We have flea medications, bowls, leashes, collars, tags, food enrichment toys, runners. We have all sorts of stuff. And so on every single call we go out there and we're dealing with folks, we realize they need something, boom, we can just help them out right then and there, as opposed to saying, you know, that's a dirty water bowl, you should get a new water bowl. We can just give them that water bowl right then and there. Oh, your dog never gets out, you know, your dog doesn't have a tag on, or your cat doesn't have a collar and tag, boom, I got a collar and tag, let's just put it on the cat right now. Now it's not going to get lost. And in our day-to-day work, we're less punitive. There's fewer citations and notices to comply. We work a heck of a lot closer with our community. They trust us, they want us there, they invite us into their houses. I can't count the number of tamales I've eaten out there, and I'm a vegan and I've probably eaten some lard, but you know what, I'm not going to go in there and disrespect folks when they invite me in and make a tamale for me. We have far better compliance rates, improved lives for the animals, we have a ton less animals being surrendered to the animal shelter, and the officers love their jobs. The officers are excited with their jobs now. The officers aren't coming in going, oh my God, I got yelled at by blah, blah, blah today. They come in and go, oh my God, I got hugged by blah, blah, blah. And it's wonderful. You know, it's all about seeing. They actually, my staff put a sign above my door that says, it's all about kumbaya sometimes. And that is my new motto. It is all about kumbaya sometimes. You just sing kumbaya and the world is lovely. But it does vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. You know, as I mentioned, you know, I work in predominantly Mexican immigrant population down in Watsonville. If I'd worked in like a heavily African-American community, the way I approach things would be a little bit differently. You know, kind of just working where you work, you have to kind of understand the culture where you're working to be effective, because every culture is different and you need to understand which culture you're working in. And sometimes enforcement is still required. You know, I put that out there. I tell you all these happy, lovely stories, but this one right here is a shithole story. This one right here is Negra. This particular dog, I really tried to work with this guy to get this dog off a chain. This is a pit bull tied up on a really heavy chain, living in her own feces. You can see how the chain's just dragging along the feces. And I really tried to work with this guy to improve the conditions for this dog, and he just never listened. He never cared. So this dog she did end up getting seized. She did end up getting euthanized because she was too aggressive to place. And yes, you know, people go, oh, it's horrible, it's terrible. Why'd you euthanize that dog? You know what? That dog it's a better life for that dog than living like that. Living on a chain, living in their own feces, sometimes euthanasia still has to happen. Because when we go out there in our day-to-day work and we're making inroads into our communities, this is the outcomes I think we want. These are the outcomes we want, where the community wants us to be there, where this little boy right here, the little one standing in the front, they don't have a father. Those kids are being raised by a single mother. That's Officer Carlos Montes. He's one of my employees. He goes out there as a big imposing figure, sees this dog with this crappy doghouse, and helps with these kids build this doghouse. Because it's about the people, not just about the dog. And having this, Carlos, he's no joke, he's about 6'5", 400 pounds. Having that guy walk into your backyard wearing a uniform, you know, you're like, holy shit, this guy's huge. And to be a little boy without a father, to see a nice male come in and help you out, that's a great thing. That's something where that kid is going to remember that. That kid is going to know that not all men are bad. And I've told Officer Montes, you know, from time to time, if you're in the neighborhood, feel free, drop by, you know, talk to the kid, you know, kind of just continue to positively support them so that they don't end up in the gang, so that they, you know, stay on the right track. Because remember, didn't we all sing Whitney yesterday? Should we break out in song now? I believe children are the future. Come on. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Ah, you guys are boring. Here's some more families we helped, you know, just kind of building the dog houses, getting the dogs off the chains, and just, you know, having that work with the community, that trust with the community, has them tell their friends, has them tell their brothers, has people want to work with us more. And I think I made it. That was my 17-year-old dog, Blake. He sadly passed away this year. He was my best friend for 17 years, came to me with work every single day. He's now tattooed on my arm. I miss him every day, but he's lovely. So, to Blake.